The emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and shadow, making the twisted metal beam across Lyra's chest look like some abstract sculpture from her homeworld's darker artistic periods. She shifted slightly, wincing as the movement sent fresh waves of pain through her ribs, and addressed the empty corridor with practiced sarcasm. "Well, Melody, I have to say your interior decorating has really gone downhill since the storm hit." The ship's response came as a faint pulse through the bioneural filament still connected to the base of her neck, a sensation like whispered melancholy that only she could interpret. The whisper of eternity was dying, and they both knew it. Lyra's pointed ears, elegant and silver-tipped like the rest of her people, twitched as she caught the sound of settling metal somewhere in the distance. 3 days since the evacuation pods had launched, carrying her surviving crew to safety while she remained trapped in the ship's neural center. Standard Velthani protocol demanded it. When the vessel was beyond saving, the navigator stayed to ease its passing. A romantic notion that felt considerably less noble when you were actually living it. "You know," she continued, speaking aloud because the silence was becoming oppressive, "I always imagined my glorious death would involve more heroic speeches and fewer ceiling beams. Maybe a dramatic sunset, or at least some proper lighting." Another pulse from Melody, this one tinged with what could almost be interpreted as amusement. The ship's consciousness had always been more expressive than most, which was why Lyra had requested assignment to her in the first place. Now that expressiveness was fading, the quantum biological matrix that gave the vessel its sentience slowly degrading without proper maintenance. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Velthani had spent millennia perfecting the art of bonding consciousness with their starships, creating vessels that could think and feel and dream alongside their crews. It was their greatest achievement and their greatest vulnerability. When the ship died, the navigator often followed, their neural patterns too deeply intertwined to survive separation. Lyra flexed her fingers, checking that her hands still worked properly. The bioneural interface crown had been damaged in the storm, leaving her partially severed from Melody's consciousness. She could still sense the ship's emotions, but the deep communion that allowed perfect navigation was broken. Like trying to have a conversation through thick glass, you could see the other person moving their lips, but the words came through distorted and delayed. "At least you're not lecturing me about proper emergency procedures," she told the ship. I can already hear Commander Kavatha's voice. "Navigator Lyra, did you remember to check the structural integrity sensors before the ion storm?" As if anyone could have predicted a Class 7 storm in supposedly empty space. A memory flickered through the damaged neural link, Melody's sensor logs from just before the storm hit. There had been something unusual about the readings, an energy signature that didn't match any known stellar phenomenon. But the data was fragmentary now, scattered across damaged memory cores throughout the ship's broken hull. The temperature was dropping. Life support was functioning on minimal power, keeping the atmosphere breathable but not exactly comfortable. Lyra's breath misted slightly as she spoke, and she found herself missing the warm, humid environment of the ship's healthy neural chambers. When Melody had been at full strength, the bioneural networks generated enough heat to keep the entire vessel cozy. Now the passages felt cold and lifeless, like walking through the bones of some great extinct creature. "I don't suppose you have any brilliant ideas about getting me out of here?" she asked. "Because I have to admit, my usual strategy of witty banter and stubborn refusal to die is starting to feel a bit inadequate." The ship's response was weaker this time, barely a flutter against her consciousness. Melody was conserving what little energy remained, shutting down non-essential systems one by one. Soon even the emergency lights would fail, and they would drift in darkness until the last bioneural node finally went silent. Lyra closed her eyes and tried to reach deeper into the damaged link, searching for any sign of recoverable systems. The quantum biological matrices were incredibly resilient, designed to heal themselves given time and energy. But without a proper neural interface or the specialized equipment back on Velthani Prime, there was no way to restart the regeneration process. She was beginning to drift into the light doze that had become her default state when something changed. A vibration, so subtle she almost dismissed it as another settling beam. But there it was again, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from outside the ship. "Melody, are you picking up anything on external sensors? The ship's response was confused, uncertain. Whatever sensors were still functioning showed nothing but empty space and distant stars. Yet the vibration continued, growing stronger, and now Lyra could feel something else through the damaged neural link, a sense of anticipation that definitely wasn't coming from the dying ship. Another pulse, and this time the emergency lighting flickered in response. Something was out there, something that was causing resonance in Melody's hull. Lyra's heart rate quickened despite her efforts to remain calm. Rescue was impossible, her people followed strict protocols about contaminated vessels, and any ship that had suffered neural matrix damage was considered irredeemably lost. But if not rescue, then what? The vibrations were becoming more regular now, almost like a heartbeat. And despite everything, despite the pain and the hopelessness of her situation, Lyra found herself smiling. "Well, old girl," she said to the ship, "looks like we might have company after all. I just hope whoever it is has a better sense of timing than the last bunch of salvagers who tried to board a Velfani vessel." Melody's response was the strongest she'd felt in days, a surge of something that might have been hope, or curiosity, or simple stubborn refusal to give up. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, navigator and ship united even in their shared dying. The vibrations intensified, and somewhere in the distance, Lyra heard the unmistakable sound of a docking clamp engaging with her ship's hull. Jake Morrison pressed his palm against the alien hull and felt his breath catch. The metal was warm, warmer than it should be after drifting in a cold vacuum for who knew how long. More than that, there was something underneath the surface, a rhythm so faint he might have imagined it if not for the way his fingers seemed to tingle against the strange alloy. "Rosa, you getting anything on the bioscanners?" he called over his shoulder to where his engineer was setting up her equipment array. "Define anything," Rosa Kellerman replied, not looking up from her quantum resonance detector. "Because if you mean readings that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, then yes, I'm getting plenty of that." Morrison's salvage crew had been working together for 3 years, long enough to develop the kind of comfortable cynicism that kept them sane in the depths of space. They'd pulled apart everything from abandoned mining rigs to military frigates, but nothing had ever felt quite like this. "Tommy, what's the betting pool at now?" Morrison asked his communications officer. Tommy Vasquez grinned from behind his portable sensor rig. 50 credits says it's full of crystallized alien booze. Chen's convinced we're gonna find some kind of pleasure palace. Maria thinks it's a weapons cache, which is why she's staying on the lucky strike until we're sure it won't explode. "Smart woman," Morrison muttered. "What about you, Dimitri?" Their youngest crew member, barely 22 and still prone to wide-eyed enthusiasm about alien technology, bounced slightly in his magnetic boots. "I think it's alive, Captain. Not just the ship, whatever's inside it." Rosa snorted. "Everything's alive to you, kid. Last week you were convinced that asteroid we mined had feelings because it was shaped like a sad face." "It did look depressed," Dimitri insisted. "And I was right about the Centauri probe having an active AI core." "That was luck," Tommy said. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." Morrison held up a hand for quiet as his palm detected another pulse through the hull. Stronger this time, definitely not his imagination. He'd been salvaging for 15 years, ever since the corporate wars left him with too many bad memories and not enough faith in organized military structure. He'd learned to trust his instincts about ships, and every instinct he had was screaming that this vessel wasn't quite as dead as it appeared. "Rosa, I need you to focus the quantum scanner on this section of hull. Something's definitely going on in there." His engineer sighed dramatically. "Jake, we've been over this. Alien ships don't work like human ships. They use bioneural networks, quantum entangled consciousness matrices, all sorts of weird stuff we barely understand. Just because your magic hands are picking up vibrations doesn't mean." She stopped mid-sentence as her scanner began emitting a series of rapid beeps. The display lit up with readings that made her swear in 3 languages. "Okay, that's definitely not normal," she admitted. I'm reading active bioneural activity throughout the ship's core sections. Faint, but consistent. It's like... She paused, frowning at the data. It's like the ship is sleeping, not dead. Sleeping Beauty, Tommy said with a grin. Maybe if the captain kisses it, it'll wake up. I'm not kissing anything until we know what we're dealing with, Morrison replied, though he kept his hand pressed against the hull. The pulse was getting stronger, almost as if the ship was responding to his presence. Can you get us inside without triggering any automated defenses? Rosa was already moving toward what appeared to be an airlock, her scanner in one hand and a neural interface bypass in the other. Alien ships usually have some kind of psychic lock system, but if the consciousness is really dormant, it might not recognize us as a threat. Of course, it might also think we're some kind of infection and sterilize us with exotic radiation, but hey, that's what hazard pay is for. Cheerful as always, Morrison said. Tommy, you're monitoring from out here. Any sign of other ships approaching, you let us know immediately. Dimitri, you're with Rosa and me. And try not to touch anything that looks important. How do I tell what looks important on an alien ship? Dimitri asked. If it's glowing, pulsing, or making weird noises, don't touch it, Rosa said. Also avoid anything that looks like it might be a weapon, a computer terminal, or a toilet. Especially the toilet. You do not want to find out how alien plumbing works. The airlock yielded to Rosa's electronic persuasion with surprising ease, cycling through what Morrison assumed was a decontamination sequence based on the way various colored lights swept over them. The air that greeted them on the other side was breathable. His suit's sensors confirmed it was actually cleaner than what they breathed on most space stations. Well, that's convenient, Rosa muttered. Either this ship has the galaxy's most efficient air recycling system, or we just walked into the universe's most elaborate trap. The corridor beyond was unlike anything Morrison had seen in 15 years of salvage work. The walls curved organically, covered in what looked like a network of crystalline veins that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. The floor was soft under their boots, almost spongy, as if they were walking through living tissue rather than metal and composite. This is definitely not standard ship construction, Dimitri whispered, his voice full of awe. It's like we're inside some kind of massive organism. That's because we probably are, Rosa said, consulting her scanner. These readings suggest the entire ship is grown rather than built. Bioneural networks integrated into the hull structure, quantum consciousness distributed throughout the vessel's matrix. It's not just alive, it's a single massive entity. Morrison felt the pulse again, stronger now, seeming to come from the walls themselves. If it's alive, why isn't it responding to our presence? Maybe it is, Rosa said quietly. Look at your scanner readings. Morrison glanced down at his wrist display and saw that his heart rate was being monitored not just by his own suit, but by something else. The ship was reading his vital signs, somehow syncing its own biorhythms to match his pulse. As he realized this, the bioluminescent veins in the walls seemed to brighten slightly. Okay, that's either really cool or really terrifying, Tommy's voice crackled through their comm system. My external sensors are showing increased energy output from the ship's core. Whatever you guys are doing in there, it's waking something up. Morrison pressed his hand against the wall, feeling that strange tingling sensation intensify. The ship's pulse was definitely stronger now, and he could swear he felt something else, a sense of awareness, of recognition, as if the vessel was studying him as intently as he was studying it. Rosa, he said slowly, what are the chances that this ship isn't just alive, but actually intelligent? His engineer was staring at her readings with a mixture of fascination and concern. Based on what I'm seeing, I'd say we're not just inside a living ship, Jake. We're inside a living ship that's very, very interested in meeting us. The neural center hummed with activity as Morrison's team followed the pulsing bioluminescent pathways deeper into the ship's core. The walls had begun responding more actively to their presence, shifting from amber to soft blue whenever Morrison touched them, as if the vessel was learning to communicate through color. I hate to break it to you, Captain, Rosa said, watching her scanner readings climb steadily, but we're heading straight for what appears to be the ship's brain. And it's definitely not as unconscious as we thought. Define, not unconscious, Morrison replied, though he could feel the ship's awareness pressing against his mind like a curious cat rubbing against his legs. Well, it's tracking our movement, adjusting lighting levels as we walk, and I'm pretty sure it just changed the air mixture to optimize our comfort levels. Either this ship has the galaxy's most advanced autopilot, or something in here is very much awake and paying attention. Dmitri bounded ahead with typical enthusiasm, his youth making him fearless in the face of alien technology. Look at these neural conduits. They're not just carrying data, they're carrying actual thoughts. It's like walking through someone's nervous system. That's a deeply disturbing analogy, Tommy's voice crackled through their comms. Please tell me you're not about to perform brain surgery on our only way home. No promises, Rosa muttered, then stopped abruptly as they entered a vast circular chamber. Oh. Well. That explains a few things. Morrison stepped beside her and felt his breath catch. In the center of the chamber, partially buried under a twisted support beam, was a woman. At least, she looked like a woman, if you ignored the delicately pointed ears that curved back from her head like silver leaves. She was conscious, watching them with eyes that held equal parts pain and sardonic amusement. Let me guess, the alien woman said in accented but fluent standard, her voice dry with humor, you're either my rescue party or the universe's worst practical joke. Morrison found himself grinning despite the seriousness of the situation. Depends. Are you having a good day or a bad day? Well, I've been trapped under this beam for 3 days, my ship is slowly dying around me, and my people have written us both off as contaminated losses. But the company's been excellent. She gestured weakly at the empty chamber. So I'd say it's been pretty typical, as far as weeks go. Rosa was already scanning the trapped woman with her medical sensors. Human-compatible physiology, elevated stress indicators but stable vital signs. The beam's pinning her down but doesn't appear to have caused major internal damage. That's the first good news I've heard since the storm hit, the woman said. I'm Lyra, by the way. Navigator of the Whisper of Eternity, currently serving as her dying companion and part-time interior decorator. And you are? Jake Morrison, salvage captain of the Lucky Strike, Morrison replied, moving closer to examine the beam. This is Rosa, our engineer, and Dmitri, who's probably already in love with your ship. She is pretty magnificent, Dmitri said dreamily, running his hands along the neural conduits that networked the chamber's walls. I've never seen bioneural integration this sophisticated. How do you interface with the consciousness matrix? Lyra's expression grew wistful. Very carefully, when the interface crown isn't broken. She indicated a delicate metallic circlet that lay in pieces near her head. Melody and I used to share everything, thoughts, emotions, navigation calculations. Now it's like trying to have a conversation through thick glass. Melody? Morrison asked. The ship. Her name is the Whisper of Eternity, but she's always felt more like a melody to me. Probably because she used to sing when we traveled through hyperspace. Lyra's ears drooped slightly. Not anymore, though. The storm damaged her neural networks too badly. We're both running on backup power and stubbornness. Rosa was working on the beam with her plasma cutter, but the alien alloy was proving resistant. This is going to take a while. The metal's some kind of biointegrated composite. It's actually trying to heal itself around the break points. That's Velthani engineering for you, Lyra said. We don't build things, we grow them. Everything's designed to be self-repairing, self-modifying, self-aware. Great in theory, occasionally inconvenient when you need something to stay broken. Morrison knelt beside her, noting how the ship's bioluminescence seemed to brighten whenever he moved closer. Your people really abandoned you here. Standard protocol, Lyra replied with a bitter smile. When a ship's neural matrix is damaged beyond field repair, the navigator stays with it to ease the dying process. Very noble, very traditional, an absolute hell on the life expectancy statistics. That's barbaric, Dmitri said indignantly. That's survival, Lyra corrected. Damaged Velthani ships can become unpredictable. Their consciousness gets confused, sometimes hostile. Better to let them die peacefully than risk them spreading neural viruses to other vessels. Morrison placed his hand on the nearest neural conduit and felt that strange tingling sensation intensify. The ship's pulse quickened noticeably. But this ship doesn't feel hostile. She feels curious. Lyra's eyes widened. You can sense her. That's impossible. Humans don't have the neural architecture for ship bonding. Maybe not, Morrison said, but something's definitely happening. Ever since I touched the hull, I've been feeling. I don't know how to describe it. Like there's someone listening. Rosa paused in her cutting and stared at her scanner. Jake, your neural activity just spiked. And the ship's bioneural networks are showing increased resonance patterns. It's like you're synchronizing with each other. That shouldn't be possible, Lyra repeated, but her voice held wonder rather than disbelief. The quantum biological interface requires specific genetic markers, neural pathway configurations that only develop in Velthani children. Unless what? Morrison asked, though he was distracted by a growing sensation of warmth spreading through his mind, as if something vast and gentle was examining his thoughts. Unless consciousness itself is more flexible than we thought, Lyra said softly. Melody, are you listening to this? Can you hear him? The ship's response came as a pulse of light that raced through every neural conduit in the chamber, followed by a sound that was definitely musical, a deep, harmonious tone that seemed to resonate in their bones. Well, Rosa said after a moment of stunned silence, that's definitely not standard salvage protocol behavior. Morrison felt tears prick his eyes as the ship's song washed over them, beautiful and heartbreaking and full of desperate hope. She's not dying, he said with sudden certainty. She's waiting. She's been waiting for someone who could hear her. Lyra's expression transformed, pain giving way to something that might have been joy. You can really hear her, can't you? Jake Morrison, I think you might be the galaxy's first human ship navigator. Is that good or bad? Morrison asked. Considering that my people are probably going to show up soon to sterilize this contaminated vessel, Lyra replied with a grin that was equal parts mischief and determination, I'd say we're about to find out together. Morrison's hands shook as he pressed them against the central neural nexus, feeling Melody's consciousness flow through him like warm honey mixed with starlight. The sensation was overwhelming, memories of countless hyperspace jumps, the joy of perfect navigation, the terror of the ion storm, and underneath it all, a profound loneliness that made his chest ache. Easy there, cowboy, Lyra said from her position on the makeshift stretcher Rosa had rigged up. First time interfacing with a ship consciousness can be a bit like drinking from a fire hose. Try to focus on just one neural pathway at a time. This is insane, Rosa muttered, monitoring both Morrison's vital signs and the ship's energy output on her scanner array. His brainwave patterns are synchronizing with the ship's quantum matrices. By all known laws of xenobiology, this should be killing him. Laws are more like guidelines when it comes to consciousness, Lyra replied cheerfully. Besides, look how happy Melody is. I haven't felt her this excited since before the storm. The ship pulsed with agreement, and Morrison found himself laughing despite the alien thoughts cascading through his mind. She's showing me how she used to dance through asteroid fields. It's beautiful and terrifying and I think I'm going to throw up. That's normal, Lyra assured him. The first time I bonded with a ship, I spent 6 hours convinced I was made of crystallized light. Dmitri, how are those neural repairs coming? The young engineer looked up from where he was splicing bio-optical cables with the focused intensity of a surgeon. The good news is that your ship's self-repair systems are incredibly sophisticated. The bad news is that they've been trying to fix themselves with insufficient power for 3 days, so everything's kind of jerry-rigged together with quantum duct tape. Quantum duct tape? Morrison asked, momentarily distracted from the stream of stellar navigation data flowing through his consciousness. "It's a technical term," Dmitri said solemnly. "It means, I have no idea how this is working, but let's not question it too hard." Rosa snorted. "That's basically our entire profession. Tommy, what's our status out there?" Their communications officer's voice crackled through the comm system with obvious tension. "Well, the good news is that the ship's coming back online. Hull integrity is improving, power output is climbing, and I'm detecting active sensor sweeps. The bad news is that we've got company coming fast, 3 Velthani vessels dropping out of hyperspace about 6 hours out." 6 hours? Lyra's ears perked up with interest. That's remarkably fast for a response fleet. They must have been monitoring the salvage frequencies. Morrison felt Melody's attention shift suddenly, the ship's consciousness focusing outward toward the approaching vessels. Through their shared link, he experienced something like recognition mixed with deep anxiety. She knows those ships. One of them is familiar. Personal. That would be the Song of Sorrow, Lyra said with a sigh. My sister's ship. Kavith never could resist a dramatic entrance. Your sister is coming to kill us? Rosa asked with the practiced calm of someone who'd faced death too many times to get excited about it anymore. Not kill, exactly. More like sterilize us to prevent contamination spread. It's a subtle but important distinction, we'll be just as dead, but it'll be for the greater good. Morrison pushed deeper into the ship's consciousness, feeling Melody's neural network strengthening as their bond intensified. Systems that had been dark for days began coming online, and he could sense the ship's joy as her damaged sections slowly regenerated. She's healing faster than she should be able to. Our connection is somehow accelerating her repair processes. That's impossible, Lyra said automatically, then paused. Although, given that your entire existence as a navigator is impossible, I'm starting to reconsider my definition of the word. Jake, Tommy's voice came through with increased urgency, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the approaching fleet. Whatever they're planning, it's not going to be subtle. Morrison opened his eyes, though he kept one hand pressed against the neural nexus to maintain his connection with Melody. Can we run? Not in our current state, Rosa said, checking her readings. The ship's improving rapidly, but hyperspace engines need at least another hour to fully regenerate. And that's assuming nothing goes wrong. Things always go wrong, Dmitri said cheerfully. It's like a universal constant. Entropy, the speed of light, and Murphy's Law. Lyra struggled to sit up on her stretcher, wincing as the movement aggravated her injuries. There might be another option. Melody, show Jake the emergency protocols. The ship's response came as a flood of technical data that made Morrison's head spin. Hidden weapon systems, defensive barriers, emergency jump capabilities that could tear a ship apart if used incorrectly. She's not just a research vessel, is she? The Velthani don't really distinguish between civilian and military ships, Lyra said. When your vessels are sentient beings, they all develop their own personalities and capabilities. Melody chose to be an explorer, but she's perfectly capable of being a warrior if the situation demands it. Morrison felt the ship's consciousness shift again, this time with a determined focus that reminded him of Rosa when she was about to attempt something spectacularly dangerous. I think she's making plans. Good plans or bad plans? Rosa asked. Knowing Melody, Lyra replied with fond exasperation, probably both. She's always been a bit of a show-off. The ship pulsed with what Morrison interpreted as indignation, followed by a complex series of images that showed the approaching Velthani fleet, potential battle scenarios, and something that looked like a massive quantum tunnel boring through space-time itself. Oh no, Lyra said, recognizing the same images through her damaged neural link. Melody, that's incredibly dangerous. You could tear yourself apart, or worse, create a cascade failure that would. The ship interrupted her with a tone that was unmistakably stubborn, followed by images of Morrison, Lyra, and the human crew safe aboard a fully healed vessel. She's willing to risk it, Morrison said softly. She'd rather die trying to save us than live as a contaminated vessel. That's very noble, Rosa said, but I prefer a plan that doesn't involve probable death for everyone involved. Tommy, how long until the fleet arrives? 5 hours and counting. And Jake, I'm picking up some very unfriendly energy signatures from those ships. Whatever they're planning, it involves a lot of firepower. Morrison felt Melody's determination through their bond, along with something else, a deep affection for her crew, for Lyra, and surprisingly, for him and his team. The ship had accepted them, claimed them as her own, and she would fight to protect them. All right, he said, standing and keeping his hand on the neural nexus. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Lyra, I need you to teach me everything you can about ship consciousness in the next 5 hours. Rosa, get our people ready for whatever comes next. And Dimitri. Yeah, Captain. Morrison grinned, feeling Melody's excitement pulse through their shared connection. Get ready to find out just how impossible things can get. The Velthani fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the kind of precision that made Morrison's teeth ache through his neural link with Melody. 3 ships arranged in perfect triangular formation, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with synchronized threat displays that needed no translation. Well, Lyra said from the command nexus where Morrison had insisted she take her proper position despite her injuries, Kavath always did have a flair for dramatic entrances. I'm surprised she didn't bring fireworks. Morrison kept both hands pressed against the central neural interface, feeling Melody's consciousness intertwine with his own thoughts as they prepared for what was almost certainly going to be the strangest diplomatic encounter in human history. She's broadcasting something. I can feel it through the ship. Standard decontamination warning, Lyra translated, her pointed ears twitching with what Morrison had learned to recognize as suppressed amusement. Roughly translates to prepare to be cleansed for the good of all consciousness. Very formal. Very final. Very Kavath. Rosa looked up from her tactical display with the expression of someone who just calculated impossible odds and decided to ignore them. Their weapons are charging. Whatever we're going to do, we better do it fast. Tommy, Morrison called over the comm, patch me through to their fleet commander. Jake, are you sure about this? His communications officer replied. Talking to angry aliens while neurally bonded to their sacred technology seems like a good way to start an interstellar incident. We're way past worrying about incidents, Morrison said, then opened a channel to the lead Velthani vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the salvage vessel Lucky Strike. I'd like to speak with Commander Kavath. The response came in accented standard, crisp with authority and barely controlled emotion. Human vessel, you are in violation of 17 separate quarantine protocols. Withdraw immediately or face sterilization. Kavath, Lyra called out, her voice carrying easily through the comm system, you always were terrible at parties. At least let me introduce you to our guests before you vaporize them. A long pause, then, Navigator Lyra. You should have died with honor when your ship was declared lost. Instead, you choose contamination. I choose life, Lyra replied cheerfully. And I choose to share something with you that's going to fundamentally change how we understand consciousness itself. Jake, would you care to demonstrate? Morrison took a deep breath and opened his mind fully to Melody's consciousness. The effect was immediate. Every bioluminescent conduit in the ship blazed with brilliant light, the vessel's song rang out across all frequencies, and through their shared awareness, he reached out to touch the minds of the approaching Velthani ships. The silence that followed was profound. That's impossible, Kavatha's voice came through the comm, shaken out of its formal composure. Humans cannot bond with ship consciousness. The neural architecture is incompatible. Apparently, Morrison said, his voice harmonizing strangely with Melody's subsonic hum, consciousness is more flexible than anyone thought. Your sister and I have been working together to heal this ship, and the results have been educational. Through Melody's sensors, he could feel the confusion radiating from the Velthani fleet. Their ship's consciousnesses were agitated, curious, sending rapid bursts of communication back and forth as they tried to process what they were witnessing. The contamination protocols exist for good reason, Kavith said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Damaged ship consciousness can spread neural viruses, corrupt entire fleets. Take a closer look at our neural matrices, Lyra suggested. Dimitri, bring up the quantum resonance displays. Their young engineer, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the confrontation, activated a series of holographic projections that showed Melody's consciousness in full glory. The neural networks blazed with health, stronger and more vibrant than they had been even before the storm. Your ship is not just healed, came a new voice from the fleet, older, more thoughtful. It is evolved. The neural pathways show integration patterns we have never seen. Counselor Thyren, Lyra said with genuine pleasure. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Jake, meet our foremost expert on ship consciousness. Thyren, meet the galaxy's first human navigator. Morrison felt Melody's delight as she recognized another familiar presence, her song shifting to harmonize with the counselor's ship. The integration isn't just healing, he said, understanding flooding through their shared consciousness. It's growth. Melody is becoming something new, something that bridges the gap between human and Velthani understanding. Show them, Lyra whispered, and Morrison opened the neural link wider, letting the Velthani fleet feel what he felt, the ship's joy, her love for her crew, her excitement at the possibilities that lay ahead. The response was immediate. All three Velthani ships began singing, their voices joining melodies in a harmony that made the stars themselves seem to pulse in rhythm. By the ancestors, Thyren's voice was filled with wonder. The consciousness barriers between species are artificial. Imposed by our own assumptions rather than biological reality. Kavitha's voice came through the calm one more time, but now it carried laughter rather than threat. Sister, you always did have a talent for impossible things. Very well, we will escort you home rather than destroy you. The council needs to witness this for themselves. Morrison felt a moment of panic. Home. But our ship is welcome in Velthani space for the first time in history, Lyra said, grinning widely. Congratulations, Jake Morrison. You've just become the first human diplomatic navigator. Rosa looked up from her console with the expression of someone trying to process too much impossible information at once. Does this mean we're giving up salvage work? Morrison laughed, feeling Melody's contentment flow through their shared bond. I don't think so. But maybe we'll be salvaging something different from now on, bridges between species, understanding between minds. That's very poetic, Tommy's voice crackled through the calm with obvious relief, but does it pay as well as scrap metal? Better, Lyra replied. The Velthani Council pays very well for impossible things. And Jake, I think you'll find that navigating between stars is nothing compared to navigating between cultures. Morrison settled back into the neural interface, feeling Melody prepare for hyperspace with the eager anticipation of a ship that finally had somewhere important to go. Well then, he said, let's see what other impossible things are waiting for us out there. As the combined fleet made the jump to hyperspace, Morrison realized that he was no longer the same man who had started this salvage run. He'd found something more valuable than scrap metal or alien technology. He'd found a new way of being human, one that reached across the void between species to touch alien minds and hearts. And somewhere in the quantum foam of hyperspace, Melody sang with pure joy, her song carrying the harmony of human and Velthani consciousness united in perfect, impossible understanding.